What is a spacewalk? Why do astronauts go on spacewalks? Astronauts go on spacewalks for many reasons. Spacewalks let astronauts work outside the spacecraft while still in space. Astronauts can do science experiments on a spacewalk. Experiments can be placed on the outside of a spacecraft. This lets scientists learn how being in space affects different things. Spacewalks also let astronauts test new equipment. They can repair satellites or spacecrafts that are in space. By going on spacewalks, astronauts can fix things instead of bringing them back to Earth to fix. Ed White was the first American to perform a spacewalk. How do astronauts go on spacewalks? When astronauts go on spacewalks, they wear spacesuits to keep themselves safe. Inside spacesuits, astronauts have the oxygen they need to breathe. They have the water they need to drink. Astronauts put on their spacesuits several hours before a spacewalk. The suits are pressurized. This means that the suits are filled with oxygen. Once in their suits, astronauts breathe pure oxygen for a few hours. Breathing only oxygen gets rid of all the nitrogen in an astronaut's body. If they didn't get rid of that nitrogen, the astronauts might get gas bubbles in their body when they walked in space. These gas bubbles can cause astronauts to feel pain in their shoulders, elbows, wrists, and knees. This pain is called getting the bends because it affects the places where the body bends. Scuba divers can also get the bends. Astronauts are now ready to get out of their spacecraft. They leave the spacecraft through a special door called an airlock. The airlock has two doors. When astronauts are inside the spacecraft, the airlock is airtight, so no air can get out. When astronauts get ready to go on a spacewalk, they go through the first door and lock it tight behind them. They can open the second door without any air getting out of the spacecraft. After a spacewalk, astronauts go back inside through the airlock. Astronauts on the International Space Station exit their spacecraft for a spacewalk through the Quest airlock. How do astronauts stay safe during spacewalks? When on a spacewalk, astronauts use safety tethers to stay close to their spacecraft. Tethers are like ropes. One end is hooked to the spacewalker. The other end is connected to the vehicle. The safety tethers keep astronauts from floating away into space. Astronauts also use tethers to keep tools from floating away. They tether their tools to their spacesuits. Another way astronauts stay safe during spacewalks is by wearing a SAFER. SAFER stands for Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue. SAFER is worn like a backpack. It uses a small jet thrusters to let an astronaut move around in space. If an astronaut were to become untethered and float away, SAFER would help him or her fly back to the spacecraft. Astronauts control SAFER with a small joystick like on a video game. Number 7. Read the paragraphs. Astronauts put their spacesuits several hours before a spacewalk. The suits are pressurized. This means that the suits are filled with oxygen. Once in their suits, astronauts breathe pure oxygen for a few hours. Breathing only oxygen gets rid of all the nitrogen in an astronaut's body. If they didn't get rid of the nitrogen, the astronauts might get gas bubbles in their body when they walked in space. These gas bubbles can cause astronauts to feel pain in their shoulders, elbows, wrists, and knees. This pain is called getting the bends because it affects the places where the body bends. Scuba divers can also get the bends. Number 1. What is the connection between these paragraphs? A. They compare the air in a spacesuit to the air in the spacecraft. B. They show the sequence of steps astronauts take to prepare for a spacewalk. C. The first paragraph shows the solution to the problem of having gas bubbles in the blood described in the second paragraph. D. The first paragraph shows the effects of staying in a spacesuit too long, and the second paragraph shows the causes. Number 2. What is the main idea of the passage from What is a Spacewalk? Support your answer with details from the article. Number 3. What is one kind of important work that astronauts do when they are on a spacewalk? A. Astronauts fly through space to explore during spacewalks. B. Astronauts hook tools onto their spacecraft during spacewalks. C. Astronauts can make repairs to objects during spacewalks. D. Astronauts do scientific tests on their bodies during spacewalks. Number 4. Why are 2 doors needed to create an airlock on a spacecraft? A. To make it safe for astronauts to enter and exit the spacecraft on Earth. B. To let the astronauts do scientific experiments to see how air in outer space affects living things. C. To allow the astronauts to go into space without letting air out of the spacecraft. D. To provide a place where astronauts can connect their ropes to the spacecraft so they do not float away.